Today's reading, titled Fireworks of Life, was written by Patricia Rabin. On New Year's Eve, when high-powered fireworks detonate across cities and towns worldwide, the noise is loud on purpose. By their nature, say manufacturers, flashy fireworks are meant to split the atmosphere, literally. Repeater blasts can sound the loudest, especially when exploded near the ground. Troubles, too, can boom through our hearts, minds, and homes. The fireworks of life, family struggles, relationship problems, work challenges, financial strain, even church division, can feel like explosions, rattling our emotional atmosphere. Yet we know the one who lifts us over this uproar. Christ himself is our peace, Paul wrote in Ephesians 2:14. When we abide in his presence, his peace is greater than any disruption, quieting the noise of any worry, hurt, or disunity. This would have been powerful assurance to Jews and Gentiles alike. Verse 12 says they'd once lived without hope and without God in the world. Now they face threats of persecution and internal threats of division. But in Christ, they'd been brought near to him and consequently to each other by his blood. Verse 14 says, "For he himself is our peace, who has made the two groups one and has destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility." As we start a new year, with threats of unrest and division ever rumbling on the horizon, let's turn from life's noisy trials to seek our ever-present peace. He quiets the booms, healing us.
Our reading is titled Uncharted Waters, and it was written by Sheridan Voisey. The ball drops in New York's Times Square. The crowd counts down to Big Ben chiming. Sydney Harbor erupts in fireworks. However your city marks it, there's something exciting about welcoming in a new year and the fresh start it brings. On New Year's Day, we push out into new waters. What friendships and opportunities might we find? For all its excitement, though, a new year can be unsettling. None of us knows the future or what storms it may hold. Many New Year's traditions reflect this. Fireworks were invented in China to supposedly ward off evil spirits and make a new season prosperous. And New Year's resolutions date back to the Babylonians, who made vows to appease their gods. Such acts were an attempt to make an unknown future secure. When they weren't making vows, the Babylonians were busy conquering people, including Israel. In time, God sent the enslaved Jews this message in Isaiah 43. "Do not fear when you pass through the waters. I will be with you." Later, Jesus said something similar in Matthew 8 when he and the disciples were caught sailing in a violent storm. "Why are you so afraid?" he told them before commanding the waters to be still. Today, we push out from the shore into new, uncharted waters. Whatever we face, he's with us, and he has the power to calm the waves.
Today's reading, titled When the Floods Come, was written by John Blaze. I live in Colorado, a state in the western U.S. known for the Rocky Mountains and our annual snowfall. Yet the worst natural disaster in my state had nothing to do with snow, but rain. The Big Thompson flood occurred on July 31st, 1976, around the resort town of Estes Park. When the water finally receded, the death toll was 144 lives, not including livestock. In the wake of that disaster, significant studies were done in the area, especially in regard to the foundation of roads and highways. The walls of the roads that withstood the storm were those filled with concrete, In other words, they had a sure and strong foundation. In our lives, the question is not if the floods will come, but when. Sometimes we have advance notice, but usually not. Jesus stresses a strong foundation for such times, one built not just by hearing his words, but also by living out the gospel. That practice is almost like pouring concrete into our lives. When the floods come, and they will, we can withstand them because we've been well built. The absence of practice leaves our lives vulnerable to collapse and destruction. It's the difference between being wise and foolish. It's good to pause occasionally and do a little foundation assessment. Jesus will help us to fortify the weak places that we might stand strong in his power when the floods come.
Moving at the Speed of Jesus was written by Adam Holes. Recently, my car needed work. The mechanic's shop was close, a mile from my home, so I decided to just walk home. But as I shuffled along next to a bustling thoroughfare, I noticed something. Everyone else was moving so fast. This isn't rocket science. Cars go faster than pedestrians. Zip, zip, zip. As I ambled home, I had a realization. We're so used to moving fast, all the time. Then another realization. I often expect God to move just as quickly. I want his plans to fit my speedy timetable. When Jesus lived on earth, his seemingly slow pace sometimes disappointed his friends. In John 11, Mary and Martha sent word that their brother Lazarus was sick. They knew Jesus could help, but he arrived some 4 days later after Lazarus had died. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus in verse 21, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Translation: Jesus didn't move fast enough. But he had bigger plans, raising Lazarus from the dead. Can you relate to Martha's desperation? I can. Sometimes I long for Jesus to move more quickly to answer a prayer. Sometimes it seems like he's late. But Jesus' sovereign schedule is different from ours. He accomplishes his saving work on his timetable, not ours. And the ultimate outcome displays his glory and goodness in ways that are so much greater than our plans.
Our reading is titled A Lifestyle of Worship, and it was written by So-Chi Dixon. As I waited in the breakfast buffet line at a Christian conference center, a group of women entered the dining hall. I smiled, saying hello to a woman who stepped into the line behind me. Returning my greeting, she said, "I know you." We scooped scrambled eggs onto our plates and tried to figure out where we'd met, but I was pretty sure she'd mistaken me for someone else. When we returned for lunch, the woman approached me. "Do you drive a white car?" I shrugged. "I used to, a few years ago." She laughed. "We stopped at the same traffic light by the elementary school almost every morning," she said. "You'd always be lifting your hands, singing joyfully. I thought you were worshiping God, and that made me want to join in, even on the tough days." Praising God, we prayed together, hugged, and enjoyed lunch. My new friend affirmed that people notice how Jesus followers behave, even when we think no one is watching. As we embrace a lifestyle of joyful worship, we can come before our Creator anytime and anywhere. Acknowledging his enduring love and faithfulness, we can enjoy intimate communion with him and thank him for his ongoing care. Whether we're singing praises in our cars, praying in public, or spreading God's love through acts of kindness, we can inspire others to praise his name. Worshiping God is more than a Sunday morning event.
Our reading is titled A Ripening Process, and it was written by Amy Boucher Pye. Early in his 50-year ministry in Cambridge, England, Charles Simeon met a neighboring pastor, Henry Venn, and his daughters. After the visit, the daughters remarked how harsh and self-assertive the young man seemed. In response, Venn asked his daughters to pick a peach from the trees. When they wondered why their father would want the unripe fruit, he responded, "Well, my dears, it is green now, and we must wait. But a little more sun and a few more showers, and the peach will be ripe and sweet." So it is with Mr. Simeon. Over the years, Simeon did soften through God's transforming grace. One reason was his commitment to read the Bible and pray every day. A friend who stayed with him for a few months witnessed this practice and remarked, "Here was the secret of his great grace and spiritual strength." Simeon, in his daily time with God, followed the practice of the prophet Jeremiah, who faithfully listened for God's words. Jeremiah depended on them so much that he said in Jeremiah chapter 15, "When your words came, I ate them." He mulled and chewed over God's words, which were his joy and his heart's delight. If we too resemble a sour green fruit, we can trust that God will help to soften us through his Spirit as we get to know him through reading and obeying the scriptures.
Reading titled Depths of Love was written by Elisa Morgan. 3-year-old Dylan McCoy had just learned to swim when he fell through a rotted plywood covering into a 40-foot deep, stone-walled well in his grandfather's backyard. Dylan managed to stay afloat in 10 feet of water until his father went down to rescue him. Firefighters brought ropes to raise the boy, but the father was so worried about his son that he'd already climbed down the slippery rocks to make sure he was safe. Oh, the love of a parent! Oh, the lengths and depths we will go for our children. When the Apostle John writes to believers in the early church who were struggling to find footing for their faith as false teaching swirled about them, he extends these words like a life preserver. See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God. And that is what we are. Naming believers in Jesus as children of God was an intimate and legal labeling that brought validity to all who trust in Him. Oh, the lengths and depths God will go for His children. There are actions a parent will take only for their child, like Dylan's dad descending into a well to save his son, and like the ultimate act of our Heavenly Father, who sent His only Son to gather us close to His heart and restore us to life with Him.
Lisa Samra wrote today's devotional reading and titled it Sound the Trumpets. Taps is a trumpet call played by the U.S. military at the end of the day as well as at funerals. I was amazed when I read the unofficial lyrics and discovered that many of the verses end with the phrase, "God is nigh," or "God is near." Whether before the dark of each night settles in or while mourning the loss of a loved one, the lyrics offer soldiers the beautiful assurance that God is near. In the Old Testament, trumpets were also a reminder to the Israelites that God was near. In the middle of celebrating the feasts and festivals that were part of the covenant agreement between God and the nation of Israel, the Jews were to sound the trumpets. Blowing a trumpet was a reminder not only of God's presence, but also that He was available when they needed Him most, and He longed to help them. Today, we still need reminders that God is near. And in our own style of worship, we too can call out to God in prayer and song. Perhaps our prayers can be thought of as trumpets asking God to help us. And the beautiful encouragement is that God always hears those calls. To each of our pleas, He responds with the assurance of His presence that strengthens and comforts us in the difficulties and sorrows of life.
Our writer is James Banks, and he's titled it, God of the Invisible. Sometimes I feel as if I'm invisible, but I so want God to use me. Anne was tidying up the exercise room at the hotel I was visiting when we struck up a conversation. As we talked, I discovered she had an amazing story. I used to be a crack addict and a prostitute living on the streets, she said, but I knew God wanted me to put down my pipe and walk with Him. One day years ago, I knelt at Jesus' feet, and He set me free. I thanked Anne for sharing what God had done for her and assured her she wasn't invisible. He had used her in our conversation in a beautiful way to remind me of His power to transform lives. God loves to use people others might overlook. The Apostle Andrew isn't as well known as his brother Peter, but John chapter 1 recounts that the first thing Andrew did was to find his brother Simon Peter and tell him, "We have found the Messiah," and he brought him to Jesus. Peter met Jesus through Andrew. When Andrew, one of John the Baptist's disciples, learned about Jesus from John, he followed Jesus and believed, and immediately told his brother. Andrew's quiet faithfulness had an impact that would shake the world. God values faithful service over fame. He can use us powerfully wherever we are, even when no one is looking.
Reading titled Dig It Up was written by Ann Cetus. When Rebecca's brother and sister-in-law started having marriage problems, Rebecca prayed earnestly for their reconciliation, but they divorced. Then her sister-in-law took the children out of state, and their dad didn't protest. Rebecca never again saw the nieces she dearly loved. Years later, she said, "Because of trying to handle this sadness on my own, I let a root of bitterness start in my heart, and it began to spread to my family and friends." The book of Ruth tells about a woman named Naomi who struggled with a heart of grief that grew into bitterness. Her husband died in a foreign land, and 10 years later, both her sons died. She was left destitute with her daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah. When Naomi and Ruth returned to Naomi's home country, the whole town was excited to see them. But Naomi told her friends, "The Almighty has made my life very bitter. The Lord has afflicted me." She even asked them to call her Mara, meaning bitter. Who hasn't faced disappointment and been tempted toward bitterness? Someone says something hurtful, an expectation isn't met, or demands from others make us resentful. When we acknowledge to ourselves and God what's happening deep in our hearts, our tender gardener can help us dig up any roots of bitterness, whether they're still small or have been growing for years, and can replace them with a sweet, joyful spirit.